You're listening to the ProgAxia podcast.
Hi, it's Andy Phillips here and welcome back to the ProgAxia channel. This is my top 5, where I talk to musicians about the albums that influenced them and shaped their lives. And today we have progressive rock drummer Russ Wilson from Fragile. Hi everybody, it's Andy here, and as you can see I've got Russ Wilson with me today, the drummer from Fragile, who just brought out a brand new album, just got one sent over to me, which is absolutely fantastic, the album Beyond, which Russ is just as good as Golden Fragments. Golden Fragments is still sitting in the car.
You're very kind, Andy.
Still listening to it in the car. No, it's brilliant. So yeah, I'll stick a link into your Bandcamp so people can have a listen to that. We're going to be doing your top 5 today. So I think we need to crack on because there's some cracking albums in this top 5 that I absolutely adore. How are you anyway?
Yeah, I'm all right. You know, getting back to gigging. Been recording, doing some stuff with Nick Fletcher on his new album.
Right.
Same lineup as the last one, but that's looking to be out, I think, around about March, April next year. But yeah, gigs are coming back. We're all worried about what's going to happen next, I think, but we're keeping our fingers crossed, trying to be positive. But it's just great to be out there playing again. So yeah, I'm okay. I'm enjoying life again.
Brilliant.
Not that I wasn't. I had plenty to do, but you know, it's what it's all about, isn't it? Going out and playing.
Yeah, it's a bloody weird time. It's a weird time. You know, we've just started to go back and start and seeing a few bits and pieces, and been down to Prog the Forest the other day, which was really, really good. Went to see Steve Hackett the other week, you know. So we're going out and start seeing some acts again. But yeah, it's just a really weird time for musicians at the moment, trying to you know, just organize the gigs, just trying to get them out there and see if we're actually going to be allowed to go and see these things.
Yeah, agreed.
Very
If there's
bizarre.
anything going on abroad, that's all kind of up for question at the moment. And I've got a few things in for next year, something in France, and you know, it's just, is it going to happen? I just don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about your top 5. What's your number 5?
Number 5 is good old It Bites and Once Around the World, which you got the vinyl. So I've never had it on vinyl, that one.
Brilliant album, actually. Brilliant album.
Do you know, there's for me, there's only one Duff track on it, and that's Plastic Dreamer, but the rest of it is great. And it's what got me back into prog, actually, because I was pretty much playing pop during the 80s. You know, I was a kind of pop wannabe for a good few years. Started out with prog at the start of the 80s, but went to the dark side of pop and and did that for a bit. But hearing this album kind of reminded me that I was really a big prog fan. I mean, I did hear the first It Bites album and like that, but this one kind of blew me away, and it was what got me back into it. So you know, it's quite an important one, I think. And there's some great stuff on it. You know, you take the title track, for example, and you know, the other one that stands out for me is Old Man and the Angel. And I remember seeing Bob Dalton, their drummer, do a geeky drum clinic. Must have been around about 89, maybe 90. And he played the main pattern for Old Man and the Angel. And somebody piped up and said, you know, where'd you get the idea for this? And he said, funnily enough, as a band, they used to listen to UK, and it kind of came from, you know, the influence of listening to UK, that sort of Holdsworth and Wetton kind of unison type riff thing. Yeah, that was the inspiration, which I never expected, because it sounds so much more of the 80s than UK did, which was still firmly rooted in the 70s. But yeah, interesting. But yeah, great album.
Yeah, that is interesting, because you know, when I first started listening to It Bites, and I was a big It Bites fan, you know, and I think it was one of the reasons was because this came out in '88, and in 1988, for progressive rock fans, it was a bit of a wilderness out there.
Yeah,
you know,
true enough.
I mean, the only other album that I remember buying from that was probably Operation Mindcrime, the Queensryche album. It's the only one that was like, I've got to get that album. There was nothing else out there. It was almost like all my favourite bands at that point had sort of left me and gone to another party, which I wasn't invited to.
Well, prog was deeply uncool at that time as well, wasn't it?
Very uncool. This was an incredible album for me, because I think like you, it was like it gave me faith that there was still life to be breathed into progressive rock. I mean, I saw them right at the beginning of '88 at the Marquee, and I saw them again probably maybe March or April or something like that in the Astoria. So used to go and see them live, and they were probably one of the only bands that I was, or at those times I was only seeing a few bands. I wasn't like as prolific as I used to be, where I was going down the Marquee every week and seeing fantastic bands. In the '80s, or this time in the '80s, there wasn't a lot around. But you're right. I mean, Once Around the World, it's about 13, 14 minutes long.
Yeah. And actually, one of the things I remember about that track is it was because it's what I like about it is it's the story of a day almost, and so I used to stick that on in the car when I was doing my old computer job, and I used to drive miles. One year I think I did 50,000 miles going all over the country, as a computer geek, and so I'd get in the car when I used to live in Pewsey in Wiltshire, stick on Once Around the World, and it kind of get me in the frame of mind I needed to be to do this huge drive, the motorway thing. And so it kind of reminds me of when I had to do things I didn't like doing to earn money. So although that's not that's not a favorite time in my life, it's an important thing that got me through it. So just one of those albums. Like I say, all of the tracks are good. The other one I was thinking about just when I was looking through today, when you hear them play this stuff live, Kiss Like Judas is another absolute diamond riff. It's great.
Yeah, I mean,
in that lineup, saw them once, Guildford Civic Hall, and I think it was in between this album and Eat Me in St. Louis, and they were absolutely on it, completely on it. Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, as a live act, they were brilliant. They were brilliant. This is the second album, Eat Me in St. Louis. I went to see them on this tour as well, and this album as well is really, really good. I mean, I think it bites a little on the. They have a pop vibe to them as well. I mean, there is some pop tracks. They had some singles, which again, being a mug, I bought loads of 12-inch singles. I got, This is the one that I really love, though. This is one of my favourite 12-inch singles.
Yeah,
Old Man and the Angel.
That's a great version. The other thing I was going to say, I really did enjoy the first It Bites album, Big Lad in the Windmill.
Yeah,
that had prog leanings, definitely. It's it was not a pop album, but they'd had a pop single, and Whole New World. I remember hearing that on the radio, and that kind of jumped out the speakers. The production's fantastic on that, but it never got anywhere. I think it got to about number 30 odd or something like that. But it was played a lot on, I think at the time it was either Capital or Radio 1, because I used to have the pop radio on in the car, back in those days. But that just jumped out. I thought it was an amazing single. Really surprised it didn't get anywhere.
Yeah,
very 80s sounding though, isn't it? Production wise.
Yeah, production on the It Bites albums was really good, surprisingly good, really, because I think that's because they went in with this pop production with it, but weren't playing pop music. I mean, if you look at some of these tracks, I mean, I like Plastic Dreamer. I can understand why you don't, but I mean, I really do like Plastic Dreamer. I think it's a great track. But that side two, you never look at that side two.
Yeah.
I mean, you got Old Man the Angel, Plastic Dreamer, and Once Around the World on one side. And the side one of this is a little more poppy. This is, Midnight Kiss Like Judas, Yellow Christian. But Yellow Christian is a great track.
Yeah, I like that one. I had the single of that actually, the 7-inch. But I think what I did, Andy, is I taped it and I missed out Plastic Dreamer. So my experience was going straight from, you know, Old Man and the Angel, Hunting the Whale, which I don't know if that's on your version there. But that's
it's not on the album version, but it's on one of the
CD
singles.
So my kind of, you know, what I'm used to listening to is Old Man and the Angel, Hunting the Whale, straight into Once Around the World. But I often found myself skipping to Once Around the World. You know, that was by far my standout favorite. But I'm one of these people who likes listening to a whole album. So if it's got a track I don't like, I'll just miss it out and make myself a CD of it or whatever without that track. Playlist,
mixtape.
Yeah, mixtape or playlist they call it these days.
Yeah, we call it a mixtape.
Mixtape, that's for us old farts.
But this one was this CD was really good because I think on the album, I can't remember on the album, but I think it's the it might be the 7-inch version on the album.
There's a clumsy edit in there, I seem to remember, but the full 12-inch version, I think that's what you get on the CD. 9 minutes 21, all 9 minutes 21 of it. You know, just it feels like it kind of you get the whole of that middle section, don't you?
Yeah, which is just, again, it's just top-notch prog. I mean, I've played Once Around the World on my prog show, and I had a few comments coming back. You know, It Bites aren't prog. Have you listened to it? You know, no,
well,
go and listen to it.
They very much certainly are these days, you know. And I've seen them more times with John Mitchell in the band than I only saw them once with that original lineup. But they very definitely are a prog band, and I think very good at doing it. You know, things like the Tall Ships, the newer albums, some of that stuff is great as well.
Yeah, I think it's just sort of loved the Francis Dunnery at that point. You know, fantastic guitar, great vocals, and it's really interesting you say that they were sort of into things like Alan Holdsworth and the UK side of it and things like that, because this the one thing that really stands out is Francis Dunnery's guitar work on this album and Eat Me in St. Louis.
And it's so riff based, isn't it? You know, it's all kind of really solid riffs. And I think from a material point of view, personally, I prefer Once Around the World, but there's some great heavy riffs on the next album for sure.
Yeah, that was a bit more of a rock album with sort of progressive bits in it, but still, I mean, I love rock music, so and also at the time I got this album as well, which was a live album. Thank You and Good Night, which is a really good album as well. But it doesn't have Once Around the World in it, which is a bit of a pisser, but never mind. So that's Once Around the World. It Bites, fantastic number 5 choice. What's your number 4?
So Discipline by King Crimson, and there's some weird stories to this. Okay, so you know about this, Andy. I had a lesson with Bill Bruford when I was about 15, 16 years old, totally intimidated by him. I saw him for the launch of his book, which was probably about 10 years ago, and went up and had a chat with him about it. And I said, I had a drum lesson with you, and I was totally utterly intimidated. And he said, I'm really sorry. But I said, I don't think it was your fault, Bill. I think it was the fact that as a drumming hero, it's always kind of, it's nerve-wracking to meet your heroes, but it's almost even more nerve-wracking to be judged as a drummer by somebody who you put up on a pedestal. And so he was quite pedantic when I had this lesson with him, and he drew a circle on the snare drum. So I said to him, how do you get that snare drum sound, that rim sort of sound? And he said, I just hit it in the same place every time. And I thought, surely you can't. He drew a circle on the snare drum, and I noticed, and he noticed, that I wasn't hitting it in the same place every time. He said, you've got to be more consistent than that. And so he sat down and played, and I thought, there it is, there's the rim shot, there's the sound. And every single time he's bang on with it. So yeah, it was intimidating, but at the time I remember him saying that he was working on a new setup, and he had this sort of funny, what we call these days, us drummers would call it a hybrid setup, electronic and acoustic. And it's the stuff that you you see on the Discipline footage where he's got octobarns over to the right, and he's got a Simmons bass drum and a Simmons pad and rototoms and the acoustic snare, acoustic cymbals, and he had that set up when I was there for a lesson, which I think was about 6 months to a year before he went off on tour with those guys, and another thing that I remember from that day is he gave me a bootleg tape of Bruford. And I cannot find this thing anywhere. It's probably somewhere in the loft with all my other tapes. If I could find that, that'd be a great thing to digitize. But I said to him, what does this kit sound like? He said, oh, there's a tape here. I was using some of the equipment on this. This is the last stuff I did with Bruford, and so gave me this bootleg straight off the sound desk. I wish I could find that. So there you go. True story, but a very intimidating day for a 15-year-old drummer. And, but yeah, so I took a big interest in what he was doing next, which just happened to be, the Crimson Discipline album. And I ended up, most of the gigs I used to go and see in those days, because I was based in a place called Byfleet in Surrey, our local gig was Guildford Civic Hall, which has now been knocked down and been replaced by G Live. So, for example, we were talking about It Bites earlier. The gig I saw of them with the original lineup was at Guildford Civic. The Discipline tour went with a few friends to see that at Guildford Civic, and we were right down the front, so we had a really good view of the kit and what they were doing. But the material again sounded like nothing else that was around at the time. It just kind of it was a real shock, I think, for a lot of Crimson fans that it was so modern sounding, and but also so complex. And I love like the riff for Frame by Frame. Just immediately I heard that, it's so good. And the rest of the album, as I was saying earlier with the It Bites thing, I like to listen to a whole album start to finish. That's my thing, whether that's in the car or at home with the headphones on or whatever. I like a whole piece, and I think that's probably a prog thing, maybe. It comes from listening to things like Close to the Edge and whatever. You like it to start and finish. And so there's nothing on the Discipline album that I found disappointing. It's all of that same style. First time I'd ever seen a Chapman stick played live, and that kind of blew me away. Tony Levin was just amazing. The whole band just superb. I really like that Adrian Belew sound. The whole sort of elephant talk thing. Brilliant style, just revolutionary, I think, at the time.
Yeah, I mean, you think about this album. It was I was talking about this with someone else who came on to do the top 5 and pick this album. It is completely unique, isn't it? It's just a completely unique sound. I don't think anybody had ever done anything like that before.
With every instrument, actually, when you listen to what Fripp's doing, all those patterns, it's totally out of the blue. You've got the stick, the stuff that Adrian Belew's doing with the sort of elephant sounds on the on the Strat, and it's just mad stuff. And then Bruford's got that combination of he's playing like a ride pattern on octobarns, and it's so different. It's just different for the sake of it, but it's also really, really good. It still sounds very, very current to me, that album.
Yeah, brilliant.
Dated, I don't think at all.
Yeah, I think this for me it has a little bit, only because it was. This is 1981. It's and if you think about it, 81, although it's the 80s, 81 is just in the 80s. It's like we just had all of the stuff that's come out of the 70s, and which is sort of my sort of big prog era, I guess. And so this is very, very early still. And as I say, so different from anything else that anybody else had done. I mean, typical really of King Crimson. It's like completely just throw the rule book away and redefine prog. It's basically what they've done on this. Yeah. Incredible album. I mean, in Discipline, I think is probably my favorite on that. But also, like Mate Kundasai, I think that's an absolutely beautiful track.
Yeah, it's a lovely piece, that is.
Yeah, it's just so floating, and Yeah, it's just a brilliant track, and I think you needed something like that just to break some of those really intricate guitar parts, because otherwise it would just be the same all the way through. And yeah, I just think it's a fantastic album. Sheltering Sky I really like as well. So yeah, brilliant choice. So that's your number 4, Discipline, King Crimson. What about your number 3?
Aha, UK. We mentioned UK.
Yeah, and again, you really can't have a top. It's and I'll say this again. I was saying this the other day that it's amazing how many people choose this in their top 5. Now this, because our top 5s here aren't the best progressive rock. They are the albums that influenced you as a musician, and it's amazing how many musicians are influenced by this one specific album, this UK album. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, you've got 4 guys really at the top of their game at this point, producing something that is, we've got to say, at the tail end of that sort of 70s classic prog era. But it still sounds fresh. I think there's definitely, well, we know from what's been written about the split of this band after this album that there were 2 sides, and the 2 sides of it really were Eddie Jobson and John Wetton, who were wanted to do the more commercial angle on this this sort of style, but then you had Alan Holdsworth and Bill Bruford, who wanted to do a more jazzy take on it, which they went off and did in Bruford, as we know, as history tells us. But I think for me, the combination of the 4 of them actually produced a very original sounding album, because it's got both aspects. It's definitely got some really lovely jazzy style guitar, like 30 Years, for example, from Holdsworth. Some amazing rhythm section work, in The Dead of Night. Some of the stuff in Seven, it's just great, but also kind of out of nowhere, a real keyboard hero. I think was it Roxy Music? I think he played with before UK, a couple of other things, but and then he went back into pretty much being an unknown doing film music. So he had his moment, but I just remember. So this was my first ever prog gig. Seeing UK at Guildford Civic Hall. I was 13 years old, and I went with my friend from school, Jeremy. He said, "You've got to see this band. This album's amazing." And I said, "Who's in it?" He said, "Oh, Bill Bruford's in it. You'll be interested in him, surely." And I said, "Well, of course, yeah, I know him from Yes and whatever." Didn't know the others so well, apart from Wetton because of the King Crimson thing, but just Eddie Jobson doing that Alaska solo, that sticks with me. That's amazing, and really amazing that he didn't get involved in better known bands, because what a player, but a great combination. I like the next album, Danger Money, with Terry Bozzio, who's also a fantastic drummer, and the fact that they managed to do it as a 3-piece with the electric violin replacing some of the guitar stuff. But for me, this was just a moment in time, UK, and I'm going to out-trump you, I think, Andy, with
oh yeah,
that little bootleg that I picked up some time ago, which is recorded at I think is it the Rainbow, on the same tour that I saw them on. So yeah, that's quite something for UK fans if you can pick that up. I think that came via eBay, but that's a sound desk recording of the whole set. Worth having.
I'm gonna have to have a listen to that at some point. That does sound really good. So yeah, I mean, again, there's not much more you can say about UK, because, as I say, everybody a lot of musicians seem to have this as part of their musical makeup, and quite rightly so. I mean, something like Alaska is just incredible. 30 Years is a just those tracks alone are fantastic. But of course you've got In the Dead of Night as well, that 3-part suite that it's just mind-blowing.
That where it sort of drops down to the bass and drums before that amazing solo comes in from Holdsworth, was like a blueprint we used in the first prog band I was ever in. They did this thing where they kind of split the band in 2 almost, and then you get the unison stuff and whatever, and and that is a great technique. You know, bass and drums are locked in with something, and then you got the guitar and keys locked in with something. You know, it's classic, isn't it? But it's such a great riff. That I know it's a bass riff, really, you know, but it kind of just, for me, it's just a classic moment. That, even though, I mean, I've got to say, I was too young to experience the earlier prog stuff firsthand, but this being like my first real prog gig, that was a launch pad for me. So it kind of it's important for me in that reason that although it's the tail end of that era, for me it was when I first got into it as firsthand, you know, seeing these guys play live.
Yeah, I can remember when I bought this, which probably would have been about maybe 81, I guess, when I bought it. But I remember listening to this nearly for the first time, and because it had John Wetton's vocals on it, which just are so in that prog legacy sound, that vibe is, you know, John Wetton's vocals, great bass, Alan Holdsworth. I didn't really know too much about Alan Holdsworth in 81. I knew he was on some albums that I quite liked, but I didn't really sort of equate him to being this amazing guitar player. But it was Bill Bruford's drums, because I'm a drummer as well. You know, Bill Bruford's drums, when you listen to it, it's bonkers. It's just so in the pocket and so tight and so clever and so clean. Everything just seems so incredibly clean. You know, at the time I was listening to sort of, you know, Sabs and all those sort of things, you know, and you've got these great big splashy drums, and you got Bill Bruford again, you know, from things like Close to the Edge and all the other stuff like that. So, but it's just this wonderfully clean, intricate, fantastic drumming. So you put all this stuff together, you know, Eddie Jobson, John Wetton, Alan Holdsworth, and Bill Bruford. It's like a match made in heaven. I mean, it was a super group, obviously, it was put together as like a bit of a prog super group, but my God.
That's kind of how it was pushed. And I remember seeing the kit when I walked into Guildford Civic, and we were up on the balcony, so quite a long way back. I couldn't work out what he had set up, but it, you know, I now know it's a full set of rototoms, which, you know, after that I saw Camel and Andy Ward had a full set of rototoms as well. But just that sound, the fact that you could stick the mic right inside the rototom, it's different to a concert tom sound. It's much more ringy, more sort of timbali like. Went really well with that snare sound that Bruford creates. Just, it sounded really different. And you know, when you hear those tom fills on the UK album, they really do jump out. Such a great sound.
Yeah, fantastic albums. UK by UK. Great choice. What's your number 2?
Well, having spent so much time playing this stuff in recent years, I'd have to put a Yes album in there. And funnily enough, again, you know, going for the one, you and your vinyl, Andy. Oh, nice. I think I never got to see Yes live until the Union tour, or Onion as Rick Wakeman called it, because it made him cry. I don't think the tour did. I think he enjoyed the tour, but the album that followed it made him cry, I think was the quote. So I never got to see him. I can't think why it was. I think they were only playing up at Wembley. I couldn't get tickets for the Tomato tour, that was the first album I bought. Bit disappointing. So I went back to the previous album and bought Going for the One, and was just blown away. And then bought Close to the Edge. Then bought the Yes album, and then Fragile, and so on. You know, and sort of going backwards really was the key to me with Yes. I didn't find much on Tomato that really inspired me, but I loved what I heard with the older stuff. This album in particular, it's another one, you know, stick it on, you can play it all the way through. So, you know, there's only one track on this album, Going for the One, the title track, that I haven't played with Fragile, the Yes tribute. Everything else we've done at some point in various live sets. Turn of the Century, what a nice track. Really, really
beautiful.
draws you in. You know, that was fun to play. Well, there's not a lot of drums in it. It's all sort of timpani and gongs and that sort of thing. But I got to say, my favourite on the whole album is Awaken, and John Anderson's been quoted as saying, you know, that is the track that exemplifies everything about Yes. It's got everything in it, you know, from a point of view of style for Yes, and for me, I think it's the greatest Yes piece written. You know, and not to do Down Close to the Edge or Fragile or anything like that. They're all amazing pieces, but that's the one. It's the standout track for me. So I had to pick this album because that's my favourite Yes piece. You know.
Yeah, I mean, again, for me, I was well into Yes at this point. I'd seen them quite a few times, and I went to the Tomato tour, and I went to this tour as well. So this is like at the peak. This is 1977. You know, this is when I was 17.
Lineup, isn't it? But for me, that's the classic lineup. As much as I love Bruford's drumming, for me, when Alan White got involved in Yes, it became more of a stadium type band, and that's sort of very obvious in some of the tracks on this album. It just had a bigger sound to it.
Yeah, because he's sort of more of a rock drummer, and I think this is, again, I've defended Alan White, you know, because people say, no, Bill Bruford is the drummer of Yes. It's like, no, Alan White came in and, you know, learnt all the set, did it in a few weeks, went on tour, and has been with them for decades. And some of the drumming, I mean, I'm a big Tales from Topographic Oceans fan. I know a lot of Yes fans go, but you know, if you listen to Alan White's drumming on Tales, it is incredible. It's just brilliant drumming. And so, I mean, I love Alan White as well. I don't really sort of like the idea that, again, a lot of you go on Yes forums and it's like, you know, Alan White isn't the Yes drummer. You know, he's just a standing, and it's like, that's just total disrespect as far as I'm concerned. You know, he's got a fantastic legacy, and his drumming on this album is incredible as well. I mean, it's so there, it's so in the pocket. It feels so right for every single track.
It's some of his best work, I think. And the other thing I was going to say about this, Andy, they're two totally different drummers, you know. So my live experience of seeing them started with Union, and they're both on stage, but both doing totally different things, you know, because Bruford had the electronic kit, the SDX at the time, and Alan White is big Ludwig kit. So they're coming at it from two totally different angles. And if you think of it like that, you know, the band sounds totally different with Bill Bruford on drums to what it sounds like with Alan White. So it's that bigger change. And for me, the reference point, the thing that I always sort of go back to, wasn't the first Yes album I heard, this one, going for the one, but it's the one that I always kind of reference as the sound of Yes that stuck with me. And then I went backwards to hear the older stuff. And then you start to think, well, actually, you know, I mean, what Bill Bruford did with them was fantastic as well. But as they got into bigger venues, I think the sound of Alan White was right for the band. Just, you know, that's just from a drummer's point of view. I'm sure you'll get it. It kind of, it made them sound bigger. And Bill's a jazz drummer, very creative jazz drummer. And, you know, I think when he applied for the advert, you know, the audition with Yes, I think he thought he was joining a jazz band. So not really.
But I tell you, this era of This Is My Yes, you know, 1977 is my Yes. It's the you know, the band that I used to go and see. I never saw them with Bruford. I've only ever seen them with Alan White, and in some big places as well. And this is the band that, you know, me and all my friends used to go and see. You know, if the Yes ticket came up, we'd buy them without even thinking about it. You know, Yes are on tour, let's get tickets. You know, it was just par for the course. But this album, again, I remember when it came out, and I was worried that it was, you know, because a lot of bands went, you know, they have this beautiful period of music, and then they go and do an album that you think, it's not really not really my Yes. It's not really my Genesis. It's not really my Rush. It's, you know, whatever it is. And so I was a little worried when this came out, but this is probably one of my favorite Yes albums. I mean, I love a lot of Yes. And if you was asked me if I've got Close to the Edge in my hand, it'd be my favourite Yes album. If you give me Relay, it's my favourite Yes album. So whenever I say my favourite Yes album, take no notice because I love them all of this period. But this album, going for the one I have real big memories of because it's 77, 17 years old, going to Wembley to see them, and just blown away by this album. Fantastic.
One thing I was going to say, Andy, if anyone ever kind of comes out with that sort of, that's simple, yes, that is, compared to, I don't know, Heart of the Sunrise or Close to the Edge or whatever. If you ever try and learn Awaken, the third verse, and this is something, you had Max on the other day doing this. Max and I discussed this at length when we were learning this for Fragile. And the third verse of Awaken, it's like a times table. You've got two separate time signatures working at once. So if you count it out, you can count 66 eighth notes, which are subdivided by 11 or 6, depending upon which side of the band you're playing on, and which how you want to count the thing. But that is damn clever. It's like a times table. We used to learn them back to front at school. So 6 times this particular example, 6 times 11 or 11 times 6. It depends on your view.
Bonkers, isn't it?
A bit geeky, but there was no simple stuff going on there. That's well thought out.
Yeah, amazing album. Yeah, Close to the Edge. Going for the one. Yes, fantastic choice. One of my favourite albums of all time. So now we're going to get onto your number one album.
Yeah, so this was what started it all for me because, when I was a young drummer, I started at the age of 9, and I'd already gone through my mum's collection of albums and, learnt all the Elton John stuff, all the Beatles stuff, and ran out of things that were inspiring me. And learning Rod Stewart stuff wasn't really my thing. My own albums that I bought at the time as a 10, 11-year-old were things like Deep Purple and Bad Company, Free, quite rocky. And I think I was 13 and I was playing in a band with a bunch of older guys, which was always the case for me then because I've been playing for 3-4 years. And these guys, the only guys who I could find who were worth forming a band with were a couple of years older. So guitarist in the band lent me this. Well, it wasn't this one, it was on vinyl, probably like you've got there.
Right, so we're talking about, because we've got to do an audio of this, we're talking about Genesis Seconds Out, the live album Genesis Seconds Out.
There you go. I knew you wouldn't let me down. So
I've also got the CD here somewhere as well, because you always have to buy these bloody things for the car, because you couldn't play an album in a car, so you had to go and buy a bloody CD.
So the guitarist of this band lent me this. He said that you'll love the drumming on this. Check it out. It's only been out a short amount of time. I think it'd been out like 6 months or something. And I put this album on from the start. 2, 3, and you're into squonk. So I was drawn in immediately because that was it sounded like a bit of a Zeppelin groove, and so I used to start playing along with that. I had a little kit with 2 toms, and at the time I was being taught by a jazz tutor, so my kit was like a Charlie Watts type setup, and I then sort of graduated after squonk onto trying to think what the second thing was that I played on it, probably Afterglow. There's a couple of big tom fills, so I ended up going around the toms about 3 times forwards and backwards to try and get enough drums to make the fills. But I do remember playing along with Dance on a Volcano and trying to work out what was going on. So bear in mind I was only like 13 or whatever at the time. I liked the thing I was hearing, but I couldn't work out how it was put together. So it took me, quite a while to understand how these odd time signatures worked. And then I think when I was about 15, I formed my first prog band. So this was really, probably how I started out listening to prog. And same thing happened. I went pretty much straight out and bought this. So I had to give the copy back to my guitarist friend, and went out and bought my own copy, and then bought Trick of the Tail, Wind and Wuthering, and then went further back, Genesis Live, and started to discover the Gabriel era, the Lamb, of course, But this was a springboard for me because it was it was the old stuff being sung by Collins. So that was my reference point. Same thing what we were saying about Yes. What I heard from Seconds Out was really the old songs delivered by Collins. Drums by Chester Thompson and a bit of Bill Bruford again in there, you know. And then it's not until I went backwards that I started to realise that, you know, well, Phil Collins was the drummer for this band. Peter Gabriel, who at that point I think had already started with Gabriel 1, he was the singer, you know. So you started to put the whole thing together. But the reference point for me was Collins singing Gabriel, interestingly enough.
Yeah, I mean, for me as well, because it's, you know, again, this is end of the 70s. This was my genesis. This was the, you know, I didn't get the chance to see Peter Gabriel apart from the Six of the Best gig, which I went to. So whenever I saw them live, you know, I really got into Genesis through The Knife, bizarrely. Someone played that to me and I just went, this is really, really interesting. And I started listening to some other Genesis stuff. And I fortunately had a friend of mine who was like really, really into Genesis and a lot of the old Genesis. So I did hear that and I loved it. But because I didn't have a chance to go, you know, Peter Gabriel had left. So first gigs I ever went to was, you know, this Genesis. And I remember buying this and this was perfect. I just thought it should be a triple.
Yeah, well, you know, it's the thing is, Supper's Ready takes up on the vinyl, and you know, it would have been nice to hear some of you know, like Collins's take on some of the other stuff. You know, I always thought with Three Sides Live, one of the things that that I loved on that was the version of it from The Lamb, and again, that Bruford snare sound is very prevalent in there. I would have loved to have had more of that sort of stuff on Seconds Out, but it forced me to kind of go back and look at where these songs came from, you know. So I ended up sort of discovering Supper's Ready because of Seconds Out, and I still think Seconds Out is the best version of it. Actually, it's a great rendition of Supper's Ready.
I think there is, you know, for me, again, I've talked to Paul about this, Paul Googe, Dr. Prog, about
his opinion on it. I know he has.
Yeah, about Supper's Ready, and it's quite strange because when I listen to this version, a version on here of Supper's Ready, which is, again, you've got to remember it's my Genesis. This is the one I went to go and see. I absolutely love this. When I listen to the Foxtrot version, I absolutely love that. I think it's the best version ever. Then I go back and listen to this and I think, this has got something more to it. And then I listen to the Foxtrot one and I think, no, that's the definitive. Confusion.
It's all good though, isn't it? You know, Land of Confusion. But
Land of Confusion. It is my epitaph. But yeah, great album. Again, the drum sound on this as well. I think this is another sort of influence of mine now, because I went out and I was playing drums in bands at the time, and I went out and I bought a Tama concert tom kit.
Oh yeah, nice.
Because of this.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's the photo, isn't it? You know, the two kits. You know, I think there's another thing that drew me in. There's two brothers in this band. What's going on? You know, I didn't see him live until the Duke tour, unfortunately, because I was supposed to go to Nebworth. I couldn't end up going to Nebworth because I think it ended up being in exams or something for me. I was a kid still at school. I'm just a couple of years too young, I think, Andy. That's the problem. But I listened to Nebworth on the radio. How about this? You know, the 78, I think, wasn't it? The Nebworth show was on Radio 1 live, and I remember sitting in my bedroom and listening to it and taping that. So there's a blast from the past.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't get to see him till 81, and there's no way they would have played Supper's Ready then. They had an album to sell.
Because I say this should be a triple album, only because it was done on the Wind and Wuthering tour.
Yeah.
And they should have had things like 11th and Mar and Done on the Rooftops, and
yeah, wouldn't that be great?
Well, it would have been a fantastic triple album, and a massive statement of what Genesis was at the time. You know, because I've heard loads of bootleg. I've got bootlegs. I've got bootlegs sitting down here of the Wind and Wuthering tour, and it's this tour. So Why they didn't put it on there, I really don't know. I don't understand that at all, because I would have loved it to be a triple album. And
I've got a bootleg from the next tour, and then there were 3 tour, the Windy City one. You got that?
yeah, I got that. Yeah.
Well, but they just started moving away from the longer stuff, and putting more of Wind and Wuthering, and then there were 3, and Trick of the Tail. The set just became more Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel. So this, I think, Seconds Out as a moment in time. It's like the merging of the 2 eras of Genesis.
Yeah.
Is probably the best way to describe it. Collins sings Gabriel or whatever is often the way that it's described. But I think for me, it became the reference point. So, but it's also a very important point in Genesis history.
Yeah. See, I can understand, from a drummer's point of view, both me and you, listening to this sort of stuff and just bowing down in awe, seriously, Phil Collins drum stuff. Although he's not playing a lot on here, you've got Bill Bruford on, I think it's Cinema Show he's on here, and the rest of it, Chester Thompson.
Yeah.
But the drum solos, the duets, and there's lots of bits in between the vocal parts where Phil gets back on the kit, and then you got these 2 drummers bathed in those lights, and it's just mind blowing to watch, and captured brilliantly on this album. So fantastic choice. Genesis Seconds Out, fantastic choice. What about albums that didn't quite make it into your top 5?
Yeah, one that I kind of got to give an honourable mention to, because I got the vinyl, so I've got to outdo you on this one. And this was my friend Jeremy, who I went to school with, who sadly lost him to cancer last year. But he lent me that album, the Gong Espresso 2 album, and he was the guy that I went to see UK with. So I saw my first prog gig with him. This actually, what I should say, Pierre Morlin, Benoit Morlin, and Alan Holdsworth in a sort of cameo role on this album, funnily enough. This is kind of almost like taking the guts of Mike Oldfield's live band, almost. The Morland brothers did. I don't know if you know Exposed, the live Mike Oldfield album.
Yeah.
They were all over that. So, but these guys play tune percussion. So this was really a fusion album, but with tune percussion overtones, and so that was an amazing wake up call for me. It made me realise that all the stuff I'd learned in my drum lessons, the jazz stuff, there's a lot of jazz influence in this album, and I think that's probably why I'm drawn towards the Bill Bruford, Alan Holdsworth side of things. I kind of was brought up really to understand the whole jazz thing, and this is no this is definitely not a rock album. That is a jazz album. But so that's one honorable mention for me, because it influenced a lot of my playing at the time. I tried to play a little bit more jazzy in the prog setting, which wasn't always easy because prog was getting heavier at that time, if anything. It's so that's one. The other one I think I ought to mention, which I haven't got a copy of here, but I bet you have, is Steve Hackett's "Please Don't Touch." Now, when I
couldn't find that this morning. I've got it somewhere, but I couldn't find it this morning.
No, I haven't got it. But at that time, I missed a lot of the stuff we were talking about. So I missed seeing Yes live. I missed seeing the version of Genesis that you got to see live. I didn't see him until the Duke tour. But one thing that I did kind of get involved in very early on in his solo career was Hackett's live gig. So Steve Hackett at that time was touring Please Don't Touch, and I saw him on the Defector tour and Spectral Mornings. So because I'd missed out on Steve with Genesis, I had to kind of see him as a solo artist, and so I kind of went to every Steve Hackett gig that I could, and I loved the Please Don't Touch album. So that is another one that was close to making the top 5. But I think all in that era, if you take it from Voyage of the Acolyte, right through to Defector. There's bits that I really like on Cured as well. The album he did with the Lindrum, the Air Conditioned Nightmare. I love that. I saw him tour that with Ian Mosley from Marillion on drums, and John Hackett, who I've since worked with Nick Fletcher. John playing Taurus pedals with his hands.
Yeah,
I think we've laughed about that before. Which is
I love that. I absolutely love that. I mean, I'm a big Steve Hackett fan. I love Steve Hackett. I think he's sorely missed from Genesis. I think he actually made that Genesis sound the Genesis sound.
Yeah.
Probably. I'm not sort of taking anything away from guitarists they're using for all the live stuff, but there's something about Steve Hackett. And this album, the one you're talking about here, Please Don't Touch, this, because Voyage of the Acolyte was his first, and it just it blew me away. I mean, there's some fantastic stuff on there.
Phil Collins is on it, isn't he?
Yeah, Phil Collins is on it and all that sort of stuff. On this one, it was a different sort of sound, wasn't it? Because he had a couple of people from Kansas on there, and it gave it that sort of American AOR sort of vibe, but didn't encroach too much on that. It was Steve Walsh, great vocals, Phil Earhart on drums as well, I just love. I mean, I love Kansas. I'm a big Kansas fan as well. I love his drumming.
It's a great album. I love that.
Yeah. And it also had Chester Thompson on there. So you got these, Phil Earhart and Chester Thompson, two incredibly brilliant drummers. Different types of drummers, but just fit every track. You also Richie Havens on there.
Randy Crawford.
Yeah. So it's and every track is really, really good. I love that album. It's such a brilliant album. So yeah, great honourable mention.
Yeah, one other before we run out of time, and I got to kind of mention Rush, because we've spoken about him before, and as a young drummer, you can't at that time you couldn't ignore Neil Peart, but he was very, very difficult to emulate and to play along with. But it's not vinyl, but it's my program from the first time I saw Rush on the Permanent Waves tour, which for me, that's the look at that.
Yeah,
that's what I get, isn't it? But that for me is also a brilliant album. Permanent Waves kind of sits there, not quite in the top 5, but certainly in the top 10, and Moving Pictures probably as well. They're a big influence on me. But I wouldn't want to play those drum parts, and even Neil Peart couldn't do it in his 60s. He was struggling to kind of do those things. Amazing drumming.
Yeah, again, this is one of my favourite albums as well from Rush. That whole period,
Hemispheres as well was a great album.
Hemispheres, Farewell to Kings, all that sort of stuff. But that album, I really, really do like. I think it's sort of stood back a little bit from the others. But there's some fantastic tracks on it, and just brilliant sounds.
Yeah.
So I love that album. Listen, that's been absolutely fantastic. So just trot through your top 5 once again. We had Once Around the World by It Bites.
Yeah.
Great album. Discipline, King Crimson.
Yeah.
Again, fantastic album. The UK album by UK, which lots of people choose, and for very, very, very good reasons. Going for the One, brilliant album as well, and finishing off with Seconds Out by Genesis. Absolutely superb. Russ, that's been absolutely fantastic. Great trip through the top 5. Really enjoyed that, because I think me and you,
it is, mate.
we have a very similar sort of I don't know, just connection with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
You may be a little younger than me, but
it's the one time I wish I was older. I wish I could have seen Genesis on the Seconds Out tour, the Wyndham Wuthering tour, and I wish I could have seen Yes on the Going for the One tour, you know. But
listen, I say exactly the same thing. I met a guy at a gig only a couple of weeks ago, and we was talking about sort of great albums and stuff like that, and he said, "Yeah, of course it was." He goes, "I don't think you can ever beat actually going to see Genesis." Not he goes, I'm talking about like older Genesis, like with Gabriel and things like that. So what you saw them? He goes, "Oh yeah, I saw them about sort of 10 times." Like, you lucky bastard. And that's when I wish I was a bit older,
Absolutely. I tell you that the best thing I've seen recently of earlier Genesis is that Bataclan remastered footage. You feel like you're there, that's amazing.
That is really, really good. That is a really, really good because they've sort of regenerated the.
It's like 4K now. It's amazing quality. Yeah, amazing.
It is incredible quality, and the vibe of it is incredible. And the Bataclan is it's a bit bigger than the Marquee, but it's got that same vibe. It's really intimate. The audience is so close, and the cameras are on stage with them.
Yeah.
Brilliant footage. Okay, mate, that's I think about time, all the time we've got, but fantastic top 5. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for asking. I've enjoyed it. It's been great.
I'll stick a link into the Fragile Bandcamp so people can go and have a listen to Beyond, which is the latest album, and also Golden Fragments, which is the first one that came out.
Thank you. And Nick Fletcher's, stick that on there as well. Cycles of Behaviour, the album that was out last year. It's another one worth a listen, and there'll be a new one out in the new year. So
yeah, well, we've got Nick coming on to do his top 5 at some point. So
I'll be listening in.
Russ, brilliant to see you again, mate. Thanks very much. And
thanks, mate.
If you love this sort of stuff, don't forget to subscribe and write some comments. Put your comments in there. What's your top 5? What's the top 5 albums that have influenced you, prog albums that have influenced you over the time? We'd love to see those as well. So don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see everybody next time. See you later. Bye-bye. Yeah, thanks for joining us on the ProgAxia podcast. Don't forget to like this video and also to leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. It really does help us. We'll see you next time.